to see you out here with the bright sunshine. That's better. And the building noises, but there's lots of flowers out here. So I'm going to show you the garden, and then I'll go inside and tell you what starlings and fish and tornadoes and matter coming out of nowhere have in common. Hi Mike, great to see you. So let me turn the camera around as soon as I find the turny thing. We're going to start by enjoying, it's getting a little bit old, but this is golden fever view, and it's so simple and it pops up everywhere, but I really like it. I really like the colour of the leaves. It's just beautiful in spring. It's very bright, and I never get tired of it. And look, the dahlias are here. Little bit eaten, that happens, but that one's very fresh and so it's dark. This one's really perfect because it's only just opened, and that's a sunburnt one. That's what happens. The sun kind of destroys the colour. And there's lots more here. So I'm just wandering around. It's nice to be out in the sunshine, my goodness. I mean, look, it's quite a colourful garden, even though you can see there are gaps. I've done some weeding, I pulled some stuff and just laid it down on the ground. There's more work that needs to be done in here. But this pelargonium just keeps on flowering. You can see it's got a little bit sunburnt too, but it's gorgeous. So, yeah, it's just a garden, and there's always something happening, and the roses need deadheading. But let's get up close with a fresh one. Isn't that beautiful? I'm very fond of this little sweetheart rose. It smells good as well. And this fuchsia, I just never get tired of it, and it never stops flowering. And the leaves are just beautiful. And look, there's a long-legged spider in there. Isn't it fabulous? Just sitting there in the sun, chilling out. This plant just never stops. I don't think it stopped flowering all year long. And there's the apple tree covered in apples. Neighbour's apple tree, but some of them over here. And more fuchsia flowers. And you can see the problem with fuchsias that happens is you get rust, see, and the leaves fall off. But the flowers keep coming. So I have no complaints. Oh look, I've got to walk into the garden to show you this. Look, we have Luculia flowers, and they are gorgeous. And they smell fabulous. Just really appreciate this bush. You just have to prune it. And, you know, then it looks also like sticks for a while, and then it comes up with more flowers and more leaves, and it just, I've kept it going for 20 years or longer by doing that. Here's the buds. So, it's really nice. The other thing, you might think, oh my God, the lawn is long. Yes, it is long. Because my dear husband has got the bug that I had when I came home, and he's not been up to mowing the lawns. But there's two things. I'm going to leave this lawn long for a while, because I'm going to let the grass run to seed, because there actually needs to be more grass and less of everything else. And also, isn't it gorgeous just watching it in the wind? I really enjoy long grass. But, you know, obviously, I weed eat the edges. It needs doing again. Everything needs doing again at this time of the year, because it just all grows so fast. There's a lot of rain. Look at the clover. But it'll dry out soon, and then everything will calm down. And look, I mean, this is really pretty, this purple thing. I've got to get out of the sun. But it's an absolute menace. If you let it run to seed, you will have nothing else. See, there's more there. So I may be mad, but I do my best to pick that out whenever I see it flowering, and that's what I'm going to do. Now over here, we have the last of the red lilies. I'll show you this one. But you don't have to be looking too hard to see that over here, the Lilium longiflorum is out. And I counted all of these flowers. It's crazy. Look, the stem has got wide. It's supposed to be round, right? But this is long. This is wide. It's a really big bulb, and it's called fasciated when it does that. And look, I counted the bulbs, I counted the flowers, and there are actually 20 of them there. That's just insane. The thing has gone totally crazy. And it's fabulous. So, yeah, that's the lilies. And these pink ones are now looking very faded. They're still quite beautiful, even though they're nearly done. And, here it is. So the lily spectacular is happening. We've got the last of the pink and cream gladioli, which I always enjoy. And then there's other lilies coming out there a bit later. And the very, very last, the Queen of the Blues, you can see I cut that all down. But I couldn't make myself take the last of the flowers off. Just get close. That one, you can see why I didn't want to take him down until he completely finished, because it's a beautiful thing. And look, the muscari are already coming up. That's crazy. They're supposed to be a spring flower. Maybe they're a winter flower and they come up in summer and then they flower in winter. I don't know. Anyway, so that's the garden. And yeah, there's a big old mulching heap and a bright reflection from the car next door. But this lily is amazing. I've never seen one with 20 flowers out all at the same time before. Okay, let's go inside and I'll tell you what I've been wrestling with in my writing today. Because I really have been wrestling. Because I'm struggling in some ways to explain things that I'm not exactly an expert about. And I really don't want to be talking through a hole in my head. You know, as in making shit up that isn't, at least to the best of my ability, real. So I've been talking about spinning energy and tiny little bits of spinning energy called Planck spherical units and the fundamental structure of matter and how all of that works. And over time I've sort of figured that out quite well, learning from Nassim Haramein and learning from Joe Dispenza and putting things together. And that's been really cool. But you might remember that last week I talked about standing waves and my experience with my sixth form physics class and you know, those unexpected standing waves that happened with the experiment. And I had this brain exploding moment when I thought, hang on a moment, the plasma of Planck's, Planck spherical units, Planck's, the plasma of Planck's, it makes up our entire universe, and it does, it's acknowledged. That's the 0-point field, by the way, the unified field, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's, where was I? What if it's just standing waves, just like my sixth form physics experiment, that make matter come out of the plasma. And then, so I spoke about that last week, and then I went back to my writing and I looked at, you know, there's these chunks of writing that I've done, and I've, you know, some of them months and months ago, and then I come back to look at it and I think, but that, I mean, it's like, where does this piece fit in the puzzle? So I've got all these disjointed bits at the end of the document where I've been working and thinking, and some of it I just pruned out. But this piece that I was looking at talks about how, you know, when you have a school of fish, and if you have one fish and it's just flicking around doing its thing, but if you have a school of fish, how come they all manage to turn at the same time? And, you know, they behave like one organism. And then you have, you know, a murmuration of starlings, that huge flock of starlings. And I found links to really nice short videos of these and put them in because, you know, those videos are going to be embedded or something in the finished thing that I'm making. And they all behave like one thing. Even though there's thousands and thousands and even hundreds of thousands of birds and there's massive murmuration, there's still all these individuals, and yet they behave like they've got one mind. And, you know, and I found a video of the wildebeest migrating across the Serengeti. And again, they look like one thing. You know, if you look at it from high enough up in the sky, it looks like this big thing that's flying over the landscape. It doesn't look like a group of individuals. Same thing happens if you have a large group of people, you know, doing a street march in a city or something. Although they're all made up of individuals, they actually act, after there's a certain number of people, they act as a collective, as a one thing. It's sort of been observed. So I was trying to make connections inside my mind between that kind of collective behaviour, which is like three-dimensional and it's alive and everything else, and the standing waves where, you know, it's a bit, but that's more two-dimensional because you have this plane of water, or you have water in something, and then you have standing waves sitting in it, and that's cool. And I was trying to make this connection, and I was struggling with it. And I went off down a side thing because, I've talked about tornadoes. Hi, Andrea! How tornadoes spin, and that's what tornadoes and those other things have in common. Is like, well, there's little bits of dust and air, and and there's water, because a tornado is really just a thunderstorm that's gone down instead of just started spinning around and doing what a thunderstorm does. It's the same thing that starts that process, but sometimes it just drops down and starts spinning. It's a vortex, and air and water and heat on their own don't do much, but when they start working together, you have this behaviour that's like one thing. Hello to New York. It has been ages. I'm glad you spotted me, Andrea. It's lovely to see you here. So I'm trying to make the connection, and of course the connection between all of those things and having matter come out of nowhere is this thing called coherence. Because when you have a flock of birds and it looks like one thing, there's a name for that. It's called emergence. You have all 50,000 starlings, and they're all off doing their own thing. But when they start to fly like that together, it is called an emergence. And when you have a school of fish and suddenly they all group together and they do their collective thing to be safe from predators or whatever it is, that's emergent behaviour. And that's the same thing with the wildebeest. They actually are an emergence. It's one thing. And I watched this other video about some research. Get this, at the Max Planck Institute of Ornithology, right? Max Planck was the father of quantum physics, and yet there is a Max Planck Institute of Ornithology. And what are they studying there? They're studying the collective behaviour of these, flocks and schools and herds, because they want to understand how it works. It's this 8-minute thing, which is fascinating, and they have these tiny fish in a big. They've got a big tank and this huge camera set up, and they actually put little transmitters on the fish, like teeny little minnow things, and they put big amounts of them in there, and then they film them at very high speed to see what they're doing, and they can then graph that and put it on a screen, and crunch really complicated mathematics with it to see how it's actually working. And then towards the end of the video, they're showing how they're actually starting to do that kind of research in the wild, which is a heck of a lot harder. Really interesting video. But the point is that these collective behaviours of living organisms and the collective behaviour of a tornado, because it's got coherence. And by the way, I almost forgot the punchline. In that research video, what they're discovering, or what they already know, but they're learning more about, is the fact that in these massive herds and flocks and schools of, fish, birds or animals or whatever, each individual is gathering information from the ones that are close to it. So each individual is going, oh, this is what's going on around me, I'm going to respond to that. So they're paying attention, gathering information and responding. And of course, by their response and by their activity, they're providing information to their neighbours. And so everybody is paying attention, and everybody is kind of tuned in and responding and communicating and cooperating. And that's what makes the thing appear like one organism and why it works so quickly. Because that's coherence. I mean, doesn't that sound like the ideal human group? If you have a bunch of people and they're working together and they're communicating, everybody's working together, you have a common goal, everybody's kind of doing their own thing, but they're doing their own thing in relationship to everybody else. And that's a really coherent group, because you're not fighting. There aren't people saying, no, I'm going here, bugger you. Everybody's cooperating and collaborating, and it's a coherent behaviour. And so I'm finally starting to get towards this coherence thing, and I've learned so much from Dr. Joe Dispenza about heart and brain coherence, which is the formula that he has discovered and teaches people how to do to create change in their lives, and amazing changes with their physical health. I've got to tell you a story about that. But also, the brain explosion that I had about matter being standing waves in the Planck plasma was like, yeah, but hang on. That's not quite the same as an emergence, and yet I know that these things are all connected. And so there was another brain explosion that I had a lot earlier about the fact that everything's spinning, right? And when things start to spin the same, like what a tornado does, well, then you get a shape, you get a vortex. And we talked a lot about vortexes and spin and all of that stuff. And I went and looked up spin at a quantum level and discovered that it's not like when you spin a ball. It isn't a round thing that spins around a single axis. You can't think of it that way. And it was only a short video. I didn't want to go down a deep rabbit hole, because if it was a deep, deep rabbit hole, I wasn't going to be able to explain it to everybody else. And in that time, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to explain that. So, but I did remember something that I heard Nassim talk about more than a year ago, and I thought, right, I got to go back to that video. So that is I need more information to even talk about spin and coherent spin. But I know that he's talked about the fact that when those little Planck spherical units are spinning coherently, that's when matter emerges from the vacuum. And that coherence, it's like, I think it somehow allows those little Planck spherical units to slow down enough that they can join hands. And then enough of them do that, then they'll make a proton, and then, and then it starts to slow down into matter, and matter can start organizing itself. And so that's where I'm going with all of this. Because that is literally, I think, how matter comes out of nothing. Something organizes the quantum vacuum fluctuations, those little Planck spherical units, into protons, and then the protons can form into matter, because the protons are just about everything that makes up matter in the universe. And, electrons hardly count for anything. So that's what I'm getting to, is that coherence is what organizes everything. Same coherence thing brought me here. Oh, wow. Yes, it does. It's called resonance, Andrea. We do indeed resonate things, because you remember, well, you might not remember, because you might have to go back if you want to. But the thing about this, the physics experiment that I did, is and this was when I was 15 or 16, tray of water and two little motors, like, electric or mechanical fingers that would tap the water. And when one finger tapped at this end, there were little circles that go out. I was like, well, that's obvious. It's like dropping a pebble in a pond, except you keep doing it. And I truly expected that when we turned on the other motor, that I would see lots of circles. But that isn't what happened. What happened was that we got an interference pattern, and it was pretty much standing still. I mean, the water was busy, but there were these peaks and these troughs, and they just stayed there. But it only works. You only get those standing waves if the two fingers are tapping at the same speed. I mean, they don't have to be tapping in phase. They can be tapping at the same speed, but, out of phase. You'll still get a pattern like that. But if one is slow and the other's quick, it doesn't work. So there has to be coherence just to get standing waves. And then when you're talking about coherent spin of all these tiny particles and having them be able to group into something bigger and something bigger and something bigger, it's like, I can't explain that yet. But this is my understanding of how matter comes out of nowhere. And the point about that is this is all energy. And we are electromagnetic beings. We're energy too. The difference is that we have volition, we have free will, and we have the ability to, we all resonate. We all emit. We don't emit, but that's another myth to bust. We all think that we are here and we emit our frequency out. No, actually, your frequency is entangled with the entire universe. It's just that there's enough coherence here where you are that protons and little Planck spherical units collapse down into matter so that you have a body and can experience life here on Earth. You think you're limited to your body and your aura that's here on Earth? Because, it can be measured. The heart produces an electromagnetic field. Where the heart is coherent, that electromagnetic field can be up to 9 feet wide, 3 meters. But really, do you think we stop there? No. We are energy, and we're as big as the universe, And the resonance that we are entangled with everything and everybody else, and it's incredibly complex and mind-blowing, but that creates our experience. This is what I find personally to be true. And the physics pretty much backs it up. So I'm not just talking out of a hole in my head, I'm saying that I think this is how it actually works. And the thing is that if I am, if you have I've talked about this often, cymatics, if you have a speaker and you turn it so the speaker's pointing up and you put some glad wrap in it and you fill it with oil or even sand or whatever, and then you play something, you play a sound, that liquid or the sand or whatever is going to form a pattern. And if you change the sound, you get a different pattern. Well, each of us is like that, except we're playing the whole universe and we manifest it here. So if we could change our sound, if we could change the information that we're resonating with, if we could change our frequency, there's all this racial vibration stuff that used to drive me crazy because I didn't know how to do it. Now I do, that's different. But for me to understand that it's this fundamental, I'm a resonance in the whole of the unified field, and you are too, and how we're resonating, just like the interference of those two, the two mechanical fingers. Well, if there's other things that are resonating the same as us, well, that's how we find those things, and those things find us. And whatever's finding me is an absolutely accurate output of who I really am, and I might not like that. And it's very challenging to change that if I don't like it. And I spent the whole of last year, or the year before, talking about why that's so difficult. About, some of the biochemistry, about the fact that changing who we are is hard because our bodies get addicted, quite literally, conditioned like Pavlov's dog, that when a certain thing happens in our world, it might not be the ringing of a bell, it might be seeing that particular person, and boom, you remember that memory that you have about that person, and all the feelings about that person come straight back. And it's actually hardwired in your brain to have that response, and more than that, your body is actually chemically used to that. And so when you decide to have a different response, first of all, you have to override that automatic response in your brain that says, I see that person, I feel upset. You have to catch that and go, oh my God, I don't want to feel upset when I see that person. And then your body, because it's so used to feeling upset when you see that person, or when you think of them, or when you remember them, which you might do 20 times a day if they really got to you, it's going to say, hang on a minute. I haven't had my chemical fix of being upset today. I'm missing that. I changed my whole cellular structure to be used to this, and you want to stop now? And it literally sends signals up to the brain and says, come on, think that really nasty thought. Feel bad for no reason, because I want my chemistry. And we have to overcome that. And a whole lot of other, it's physical in our body. It's stored there. That's why change is hard. And remember, she says, going from the body, this is the matter, this is the effect. The cause is that resonance that's us out there. And we can actually change it by changing how we think, what we do, and how we feel. Nothing new about that. I learned that from Dr. Joe Dispenza. But to me, this is why it's important, because how I think means that there is a resonance in my brain. How I feel means that there is chemistry in my body, and you better believe me, my body is going to have a resonance. And so it's this big feedback thing. I'm like the little mother's body, and me and having the experience in it is like the little mechanical arm that's tapping the water. But the water is kind of also me too. And so I can change what this is doing, and the water will change, and then it's like the water becomes different, and I get a different. It's like if you change from water, say, to oil, that oil's going to respond differently to the tapping to how the water does. So it's this feedback, I change, and then my universe kind of changes, and then it feeds back to me. And if we keep the change going, my life changes, and I can honestly say that is true. I really can, especially since I was at Cancun. I'm going to tell you that story. I promise to tell you now before I forget, because I'm nearly out of time. And I may even have mentioned it last week. I have completely forgotten, but I'm still going to tell it because it really is. It's an example. It's so powerful about so many things that people think are impossible, and yet this lady did it. This lady, her name is Eliana, her testimonial will come up on YouTube, and she was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And long story short, she had a chunk of her colon and most of her rectum removed. And once that's been done, and it wasn't even, she found out later, they must have biopsied it all, that she'd actually already managed to heal it. So it wasn't even sick when it was taken out, which is like, oh my God, that was a big thing for her to overcome. But when it was taken out, healthy as it was, because she'd healed herself already, after that she had no life. I mean, she was really chained to her toilet because she had no bowel control at all. None. And she got very depressed and she was contemplating ending her life. But there came a point, and she was around Dr. Joe's work, and then she started doing it because she had nothing else. And she came to a point where she just said to herself, this is no life. I have to grow a new rectum. Because she had 3.5 centimeters. You got no control with that at all. And, and really what she did is she put different information out into that 0-point field very conscientiously and determinedly for a long time, because there was nothing else that she could do. I mean, if there's one thing that getting really sick does for you, is it pulls you out of everything else. You can't do anything except be sick. So if you're that sick, you might as well create a new life. And she did. It took her a couple of years, but she started to get feedback after 3 months of doing this really. I mean, she was doing many hours a day because she had nothing else to do. And after about 3 months, she noticed that she could go, instead of 10 to 15 minutes between visiting the bathroom, it was like, half an hour. And the terrible pain that I had from my scar tissue was just less. Yeah, I did talk about this last week. But she was creating, she was just stretching it all out and making it bigger. And it grew back to a 10 centimeter rectum, and it was juvenile tissue. It wasn't the same age as her. It was like it was brand new. And she grew some of her colon back too, I think. And I mean, this is, you're not supposed to be able to do that. Surgically removed tissue. How does that happen? Well, I think she's just showing us that it's really possible, if you're determined enough, that you can create something out of nothing by changing your resonance, by putting the instruction out in the field and saying, this is the vortex that I'm creating here. This is the standing wave that I'm creating here. This is physics in action. Now, she didn't know any of the stuff. I'm sure she didn't know any of the stuff that I've spent all this time investigating and explaining to myself because I'm interested in it. You don't need to, but it seems that I do, because it's made a really big difference to me to understand it. But she's absolutely a demonstration. She has a life back now. Totally normal and okay. And, it's like, well, we don't know how you did that. That's what the doctors are saying. I'm sure they're really pleased for her. But she did that, and she has the before and after to prove it. And how do you explain that? She has become the master of her own emergence. She's pulled matter out of the field and regrown something that was cut out of her body. And we're not supposed to be able to do that. But apparently we can, because she's done it. Starfish regrow an arm that gets cut off. Rats regrow their tails, so do lizards. Well, apparently it's possible for us to do that too. Takes some work, but she did it. So coherence is what organizes that Planck plasma, that highly energized stew of all of these tiny spinning bits of energy that are very, very energetic, into more organized things where little vortexes start to appear, and they're called protons. And then the more organisation there is, the more coherence there is, the more those things start to behave like a school of fish or a flock of birds or a herd of wildebeest, and then they slow down into matter. And that's you and me and everything that we can recognise. I believe that the mathematics, that is way too complicated for me to understand, but I kind of trust the people who are doing the research and working it out to understand it and not to tell me lies. I believe that the mathematics tells us this is actually how it works. And more than that, there are people who are doing it. So, that's what tornadoes and flocks of birds and fish and schools of fish and herds of animals have in common with tornadoes. They all display coherent behaviour. And coherence organises matter. And really, fundamentally, not telling you how we do it, but that is how manifestation works. If you want an answer to the question, according to me, I believe that is how manifestation works. And of course, the next big piece is going to be unpacking how I do that. And it's not necessarily going to be how anybody else will do it, but there are these things that I have learned and bits and pieces that I pulled together that I'm going to share just because I can. And because this is my God of Me journey. Thank you for hanging in there with me while I rave. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you would like to learn more, check me out on Patreon, because the history is there. There's a link under this post. The history is there. You can go and check out all the other stuff I wrote about why change is so hard and follow the journey. And if you want to support me for just a few dollars a month, you can get deeper insights. I do these inside insights, and those are me sharing my journey, my applications of what this is about. And I love to share those things with my supporters. So thank you very much. It has been wonderful to see you. And I'll be back next week with another one. Who knows what I'll be writing about then. Until then, much love. Bye-bye.